Well, it's good to be back. I mean, it's been a couple of weeks, but we've had a little bit of a break. Marcus had a birthday. You went gator hunting. I mean, we've had some good times.
You
I
got that right.
I've been just mostly doing Corona stuff and sitting around trying to figure out who's going to let me walk in without a mask. But for the most part, it's been good. So, but you just got back from gator hunting. I mean, let's we talk about all these old stories, these stories like growing up, things that that have happened in the past. Let's talk about gator hunting. I want to hear about it. I actually purposefully on the way down didn't ask. I didn't want you to think I wasn't interested. I just didn't want to ask because I thought to myself, damn, this is a great story.
Well, it's I've fished a lot in my life, and I heard about fishing for alligators, and so I got online and found me a guide down in Florida, and set it up and went down there, and it was quite an experience. It was a lot like fishing for marlin or any other big fish that you go. Um, we didn't bait these, and the reason is because if you bait them and catch one, then you got what you caught, just like when you're fishing. But you could see the alligators out there. We drove around in this, and there were some canals and stuff. And it made it a lot easier this time of the year because it's low water level. The rainy season hasn't started, and so the water level was down 2 or 3, 4 feet, and so the gators were more concentrated. And then the guide could tell by the length of the snout about how big a gator was. And so they just had a treble hook type of a thing on a fishing pole, and you cast it out there and snag them, and then you try to reel them in. And I've never had anything like that. It was nothing like a marlin. I thought that sucker was going to pull me right in the river. I'm not kidding. It was 150-pound test line, and the drag was set pretty tight because they didn't want it to run back into the trees and stuff. And so I was hanging on for all I was worth, and fought it for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, something like that. And it's just like a fish. Once they fight, and you wear them out, and it finally started to come in, and just reeled it in right up to the bank. And the guide, I set my pole down, and he had another one. Well, I was fighting it, and it broke the line, and it started to swim off, and he casted it out there. It must have been 40 yards at least across this pond type thing, and caught the same alligator. And
Dude,
with,
that is like
I couldn't believe it with a different pole, and then gave me the pole, and then I reeled it back in again and got it up to the bank. And then he gave me a 9 millimeter pistol, and I just walked down the edge of the bank and shot it, and I just drug it up on the bank, and
how many times did you shoot it?
3 times.
There you go.
Okay.
I would have unloaded the clips. Plop, 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 plop.
He told me it's a semi-automatic, so anyway, it was quite an experience. It was something different that I had never done, and it was on my bucket list. I've had a friend of mine that went after him probably 20 years ago, and I've been thinking about it off and on ever since.
Well, I just I don't know if you can see this or not, but that right there, I mean that thing is unreal. We're gonna get a zoom in on this alligator. I fixed your photo, by the way.
Oh, you did for me.
Yeah. So I'll send it back to you.
All right.
Because when you sent it to me, I tried to look at it and it was sideways, and I would turn it and then it would go sideways again, and I was like, so now
There you go.
it works with your phone.
And for
That's awesome. That is great. So how much did it weigh?
you know what, it was around 150 pounds. It was 8.5 feet long, is what it was.
So it's exactly my body weight, but 2 feet longer.
Yeah, there you go.
That's amazing. And what are you going to do with it? Did you bring gator meat home, or are you going to turn it into boots?
Did not. I didn't have any way to bring the meat home. However, it's over to the taxidermist. I'm going to have a full body mount made of it. And it's...
Can I borrow it?
What I'm going to do is, I don't have a lot of room, so I'm going to have it head turned and the tail turned in the same direction, so that it shortens the length of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then just I'm going to lay it over the top of the bear rug I got down the basement.
Okay.
Sit down there in front of the fireplace.
I think you should just put it in your bed and then, and just leave it there when you snuggle up with that at night.
Yeah,
I'm just
really.
saying.
That's that was really interesting. What he did is he took a knife and made a hole right behind the skull, and then had me stick my finger in the hole. And you talk about cold-blooded. That blood was as cold as the cold water coming out of a tap, and I was so surprised. It was cold. But anyway, it's interesting.
Wait, what did they call that? The Imdula oblongata from Waterboy. They were talking about that. That's why alligators are so mad.
I have no idea.
I always thought it was because they had too many teeth and not a big enough toothbrush. But I don't know. That's awesome. Good for you. So, well, great. Well, tonight, I'm going to defer a little bit. You brought your notebook. You said there was a couple of things that you wanted to.
I left it out in the car.
Oh, you did. Okay. Well, then, guess what? I brought mine. So that's okay. Couple of things, that we've talked about, touched on a little bit as your friends growing up. We talked about Steve Coates. It's funny is last episode we talked about Steve Coates. Episode 4, and I said that I couldn't give you his first name. But it's funny is the episode before I was all Steve Coates. I didn't even think about it. But Danny Breeze, tell me about Danny Breeze.
Well, Danny was he was my age, and we talked some about him. He's the one that dropped the eggs, and he's the one that got me in trouble all the time. We had a lot of fun together. He had a spotlight on his pickup, and he'd stretch a red balloon over the top of that and pull people over, and then take off. And we got chased more than once, but he was quite the driver, and knew all the back roads. We sailing through Salt Lake, cutting down through these alleys, losing these people that were chasing us. But yeah, he was a real good friend. In fact, I was best man at his wedding when he got married. But he was the one that was driving when I plucked the tomatoes off the back of the truck, and we did a lot of rabbit hunting at night and playing around. He got married quite young. He was 18 years old when he got married, so that was about the end of it with him.
Now, I'm gonna kind of ask you kind of a vulnerable question right now, because there is a story that has stuck with me about Danny Breeze, a story that has made me rethink a lot of things in my life, because I had a similar experience with somebody, and like it's something that I've never forgotten. And that is a story you told me about when Danny Breeze passed away. And I was wondering if you would be willing to share that.
Well, you're talking about Merv.
Exactly.
Well, Danny moved to California when he went to work for Otis Elevators, and they transferred him down to San Diego, and he spent 20 something years down there. And little brother Merv, he was did a lot of public relations for the church and made films, and they did those down in San Diego, and he would go down and stay with Danny. Now Danny had four brothers, and there was Danny, and then it's odd how they named them: Danny, Ricky, Larry, Kenny, and there was one that was Danny was my age, and there was one that was Mervin's age, and he spent a lot of time up to their house, as I did. And anyway, he'd go down and stay with Danny, and they became really good friends. Stayed in his house, and when he one day Mervin was up to his office, and he just got the feeling he ought to get a hold of Danny and tell him, thanks for all he'd done for him, and chat with him. And so he got his secretary to find him. And he said, in my position, they had a lot more resources than you did. So he got him on the phone and talked to him for, I don't know, a half an hour, 45 minutes, and told him what he thought of him and all of that. And then he hung up, and Danny went outside to mow his grass and dropped dead 15 minutes later. But anyway, he was, I'd talked to him about 2 days before. I found out, I got his number, and I called him and told him I wanted him to go to the high school reunion. It was our 50th year. And he said, well, let me check. What day is it? And he said, well, I've got kids coming up from California, and I can't make it, but let's get together and have lunch. And we never made it. He passed away. But he was a good friend. I'm looking forward to seeing him again.
Yeah. A week from Tuesday. I'm just kidding. You got a long time yet. You got some time. So that's cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's one of the things I thought a lot about is the importance of when you feel like you should reach out to somebody, you should. And so that's something that you told me, that story. And that's something that stuck with me, is that, when you feel like you need to give somebody a call, you shouldn't hesitate, because you might not have that opportunity.
There's my next door neighbor, Steve's dad, Bill, was really, really good to me when I was a little kid. I used to ride with him on the tractor all of the time, and they had this old combine that they pulled behind the tractor, and I'm a little kid, and I saw him go by, and I asked Mom if I could go with him, and she said, you got to get your shoes on first. And I grabbed my shoes and started chasing him down the road, and I could keep up with him, but I couldn't gain. And here come my brother, John, in the car, and picked me up and ran me down. And we just followed him till he had to stop at a stop sign. And I jumped out of the car and ran and got on the combine, and he didn't even know I was there. And when he got to the service station, I come out, and he said, "When did you get on? I watched for you when we went by the house. I never saw you." But anyway, the reason I tell that is I spent a lot of time with him, and he got sick and went in the hospital. And I was going to go see him, and I was going to go see him, and never. And he passed away, and I felt guilty about that for a long time, just because he had been so good to me. But so when his brother, Raymond, one day I just thought, now's the time, and I just got up from my desk and got in the car and drove over to his house and spent a couple hours with him. And about 2 months later, he passed away. But I was glad that I went to see him.
Absolutely. Those are life lessons that I truly appreciate, and look back on in those stories. And you look at it in the aspect of it is a vulnerable thing to say, that I missed this opportunity, I missed this, but that's what opens it up and makes it real, makes it authentic, makes it appreciate you taking that time to share those things. One thing that I wanted to, totally, a different direction. I wanted to circle back because we talked about the day you and Coates got in that fight out in front of your yard. And I never did follow up and ask if they caught the people or if you knew what happened or why.
Yeah, it was just, it was 5 kids that from, I don't know where, that just was looking for trouble. And I didn't know who they were, never seen them before or since. So nothing ever happened.
Oh, there you go.
Except I had 2 black eyes.
I've had that before.
Talking about black eyes, if you want to hear it.
Yeah, let's talk about black eyes.
I had 2 or 3 of them in my life. And I don't know if I've told you this story about my brother John. Did I tell that story?
No, not here. So go ahead, please do.
Well, I was in our family. If the little kid was crying, it was always the oldest that got in trouble. So, and I was, well, anyway, my brother had done something to me, but it wasn't anything very bad. And I went running to my mother and crying like a kid. And I'm standing behind my mother, and my brother is facing Mom. So Mom can't see me, but my brother John can, and he's 8 years older than I am. So I was like 8, and he's like 16. And I'm sitting there crying, and Mom's just chewing him out like you can't believe, and my crying is done. And I've got my fingers in my ears going, ha, 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 at him, and he can see me, but Mom cannot. And he took one step forward and hit me so hard in the eye that it knocked me right to the ground. And I look up, and my mom's, he's running for the kitchen door, and Mom had some pan in her hand, and she was swinging at him, and he was covering the back of his head as he went out the door. And it completely shut one eye and blacked the other one, like you can't believe. And the story got around the neighborhood, and I didn't get one bit of sympathy, I'm telling you. But and then my sister gave me a black eye. She was playing the piano, and I'm just a little kid, and she's practicing piano. And it sat right on a wall, and there was a door right there, and so I'd come around the corner and just bang on the keys on the end, And she'd get mad, and I go do it again. And about the third time I come around that corner, she was laying for me, and she hit me in the eye so hard that it blacked my eye. And then I had to explain that to the neighborhood.
Was that Beth?
Yeah, Beth. Yeah, she nailed me good. But anyway.
What's up with punching in the eye? I mean, that was kind of like, I don't know. When I was a kid, that was the law. Like you could punch each other anywhere but the face.
Well, they didn't have that rule when I was a kid.
Well, I thought that was a family rule. I don't know. I guess not.
Well, I got hit in the eye that I made that rule. So.
Okay. That makes sense. Oh man, black eyes. Yeah, I've had a couple to say the least. So with your mom, I mean, let's talk about Jasmine for just a minute. I mean, Jasmine was just, lack of a better term, she was an amazing woman, but I only knew her as my grandma. I mean, she knocked me straight on my ass once. I don't know, like she was okay with old school, discipline, straight up, open hand, slap me right across the face, and that's something that I will never forget as long as I live. But what was she like, when you were a kid, like being a mom? I know she worked real hard. She baked a lot of bread. She did a lot of things. She was a dedicated woman, but what?
Well, if between mom and dad, I always mom and dad had a rule: if one said no, don't go to the other and try to get around it. So we always asked mom because she was a lot easier. But mom, it would get mad at you. One time I'd done something wrong, and they come after me, and I come riding up down the sidewalk in front of the house. And Mom was standing there with a stick, and it was about 3/4 of an inch in diameter and about 3 feet long. And she swung that thing, and it was a dried stick. And she swung a little bit low and hit the bar on the seat below my rear end and busted about 4 inches of it off, and it just went sailing. But she didn't miss the next 4 or 5 swacks. So Mom, she was a disciplinarian. If you didn't do what she told you, just like Dad was. But Mom was really, really good to me, though. I just love Mom. She was a good storyteller, and she used to iron every Monday all day long because she had, there were 8 of us that she had to do the laundry for, and so she'd sit there and tell me stories. Some of them I think she made up, but they were pretty good. But anyway, I don't know. I a lot of admiration for Mom. When she passed away, I went to the neighbor's funeral who I had a lot of respect for, and there was hardly anyone there. And I thought, well, he's outlived all of his friends because he was in his late 80s. Mom was almost 91, and that place was packed. I mean, she had a lot of friends, did a lot of good things for a lot of people, and they appreciated her and came to give her their last respects to Mom. I was quite impressed. But anyway, she was quite the lady. Her dad was, it's kind of funny that her dad was quite wealthy, comparatively speaking, and was the Banyans. He had one of the first automobiles west of the Jordan River, and and had quite a successful, cattle and stuff that he raised. But anyway, a little different than Dad. Dad, his dad was raised in Salt Lake City up in the avenues. And back then, the pollution was a lot worse in Salt Lake City than it is now. Everybody was burning coal.
Thank you to the Democrats. That's why it's so clean now.
Yeah, really. So anyway, he had a lung problem, and the doctor told him, if you don't get out of the city, you're going to be dead in 2 or 3 years. So he moved out to Granger, the West Valley now, and bought his dad helped him get a 20-acre apple orchard farm. And so he became a farmer and didn't know anything about it. And so he was an outsider out there. And until he hooked up with the Banyans, and the Banyans were old school. They were one of the first ones. It was the second, actually.
Let's not get into that.
West of the Jordan River, and that's why there used to be a Banyan out there, and then they called it Taylorsville Banyan, and then they dropped the Banyan. But anyway.
Why did they call it Taylorsville?
They called it Taylorsville because John Taylor was the one that converted him to the church. So they named part of it Banyan and part of it Taylorsville. And there was the Harkers that lived out there with them. And I was talking to my wife, who's related to the Harkers. And
Did I not just say, let's not get into this?
I said, well, if the Harkers were so hot, how come they didn't name it Harkerville then? So, but anyway.
There you go. So, let's just back up. So, was it, and maybe I just missed this, it was your dad that had the lung problem, or was it his father?
It was my grandfather.
Okay.
My dad's father.
That's what I thought.
That came out, yeah. He was, Dad was born actually in Bremerton, Washington. Went up for the World's Fair. They were going to go up and make a lot of money selling candy, and couldn't find any place to stay, and they were living in a tent, and it's wet up there, and so anyway somebody let them stay in an old roller skating rink, and that's where my dad was born. Was up there in this roller skating rink, and they came home after the fair was over, and so Dad was I think he was 2 years old or something when they moved out to West Valley. Anyway,
so he grew up. He married Jasmine, and they bought. How big was the farm when you were a kid?
Yeah, we had 20 acres when I remember, but what they did is they originally bought the house and 10 acres, and then later they bought an extra 10. And we talked about that we didn't have a lot of money, but what was interesting is that we never had any leftovers either when we sat down to the table. Dad had this big army spoon. It was the metal one, and Mom put the potatoes, the vegetables, and everything, and Dad dished up the plates. And there was, so there were no leftovers when we got through. And you ate everything that was on the plate. So one thing that I could not stomach was asparagus. And when it was in season, my sisters would go pick it and give it to Dad, and Mom would cook it. And I think she overcooked it because it was kind of mushy. And I tried everything that I could think of. Hold your nose and swallow it. But yeah, I mean, you ate it all. It was on the plate. That was just law. So anyway, they got a whole bunch of it, and Mom bottled it. And oh man, the only thing worse than fresh asparagus was bottled asparagus. So it was down the basement on the shelf, and so I went down there and took it out and put it on the fence post and shot it with a shotgun. And Mom goes down the basement and she's looking all over. She says, I know, I put it right here. I can't figure out what happened. So they went and bought her, they got some more, and she bottled some more. This time I just slid the lid off the well and just dropped it down the well. But anyway, finally, Dad came to me and said, how come you never picked me any asparagus? And I says, because you make me eat it. And he says, you give me the asparagus, you don't have to eat it anymore. And after that, I just get on the horse, and I knew everybody thought that it grew wild, and we get some people from the city coming out, trying to pick it. I'd run them off, but it was planted out there on the ditch banks, and I knew where all the things were, and I'd just ride around and get all they wanted, and I didn't have any trouble after that. But the shotgun was a good way to get rid of stuff you didn't like.
Like dogs that chase you and.
Well, actually, anyway, the other thing that I could remember is one year for Christmas, just before Christmas, my dad got a console. It was a combination record player radio. And it was pretty fancy one. It had this record, 78 RPM record player in the top. And they only got one record. And the one that was the favorite of my sister's was Silver Bells. And it was nice for a while, but come June and July, we're still hearing Silver Bells. So me and my brother, we got a little knife and scratched the record so it'd go bells, 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 and they just go tap the needle and just keep right on playing it. So pretty soon we had bells going all through the whole thing, and they still played it. So we took it out behind the barn, and I threw it up as hard as I could. My brother shot it with a shotgun, and that was the end of Silver Bells, and I've hated that song ever since.
There you go. Which brother shot it?
Paul.
Okay.
Yeah, my brother Paul. Yeah, anyway, but we took care of a lot of things with a shotgun out behind the barn.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no better way than, just throw it up in the air and poof, it's gone.
It's gone. You don't have to worry about it no more.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
So, talking back your dad, and the way he dished up food and did different things. I know he had an affinity for, a love for electricity.
Yeah, he did.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I've heard that he was immune to electricity.
Well, he seemed to be, and I don't understand how. But I saw him have him turn over an engine and put his finger on the spark plug and say, "Yep, there's juice coming to that one," and the amount of amps that's going through that sucker. But anyway, he thought you could cure everything with electricity. Like, now my brothers told me this story, but we had a dog, we had chickens, and once in a while a chicken would get out. And that we had this dog that would kill the chickens. So Dad got a board and tied an old chicken to the board with a string on the nail, and then he dumped water all the way around the board, and then hooked a 110 to it, and then turned the dog loose. And the dog goes running over there and grabs the chicken to kill it, and they flip the juice on. And boy, that dog just let out a yelp like you can't believe and goes running off. And so I asked my brother, well, did it cure the dog? And he said, no, we shot the dog. So, but anyway, that was...
Well, let me just pause and say, again, the shotgun was actually the solution.
That's what I mean. But anyway, we had chickens. There was another one where he had a calf that was sucking the mother, and it was out in the corral, and it was like a year and a half, 2 years old, and then the mother, the cow just let it. Well, when the calf suck on the milk, then we don't get any for the house, and so Dad was gonna cure it, so he ran a wire down through the into the calf's mouth, and then he was gonna turned it into the cow, and it was gonna, when it started to suck, he was gonna turn on the juice, and that was gonna cure the calf. But as it turns out, he had my brother on the switch, and he turned the switch the wrong way, and it cured it all right. It killed the calf, and so he pulled out his knife and slit his throat and butchered it right there, and we had veal for the next while, which wasn't all that bad. But anyway, my experience with that and electricity was we had chickens. And in the wintertime, the chickens, if they don't eat, they don't lay. And if there's no light, then they go to bed and they don't eat. So what we did is we had lights that came on about 5 o'clock at night, and they would stay on until 9 or 10, and then they'd go out and come on again early in the morning. And so I was out there one day with Dad, and it's in the wintertime, and the manure's wet, and we went out and manually turned on all the lights to make sure that they hadn't burned out, and was going around fixing the ones that were. And then we went into this one coop, and there was a light, just a light bulb hanging down. And he says, I wonder if the light bulb's burned out or if there's just no electricity there. So he unscrewed the bulb and he stuck his finger up in the socket. He says, I don't feel nothing. So then he spit on his finger and stuck it back up in the socket, and he says, I don't feel anything. Stick your finger up there and see if you can feel anything. So I stuck my finger up there in the socket, figuring if he can't feel anything, it can't be too bad, and it dropped me right to the ground. And that's the only time I got away with swearing at my dad. I was so mad. I come up cussing the blue streak, but he was laughing. He thought it was so funny. But anyway, yeah, Dad,
How old were you?
Oh, I was probably, I don't know, 11 or 12, something like that. I was just a young kid. But anyway, he played with electricity a lot.
Man, that's kind of cool. That's just kind of messed up. I just got to say, like, you know, if you electrocuted me, like, I would probably cuss you out pretty good, too.
Yeah, I was mad, for sure.
That's funny. That's funny. But I remember one story that we, where you kind of dodged a bullet with your old man is when you drove a truck up a tree.
Now, that wasn't my dad. That was the neighbor's.
Okay. But, I mean, if I drove the neighbor's truck up a tree, I'd still get my ass beat.
Well, they blamed my brother.
Okay. Well,
so what happened was they were after my brother. I was in the sixth grade, so I was 12, And I'd driven a little bit around in the hay fields. You know, when they're loading hay, they'd set the throttle and guide you. And I wasn't even tall enough to reach the pedals at all, so they'd get it rolling. And then they said, if you run into trouble, shut off the key. And which I do, but one time there was a pheasant run out there, and I shut the key off, and the guy come running up. What's the matter? What's the matter? I said, look at that pheasant over there, and he got mad at me, you know, because it was a pain to get it going and all the rest of it. But anyway, so my brother needed to go get a tractor off the farm, up on the dry farm. It was about a mile up this dirt road across from the house. So he takes me up there, and I knew that he wanted me to wait and follow him home on the tractor. But I did not want to drive 2 miles an hour all the way down that road. So as soon as he showed me how to put it in reverse and how to shift the gears, and he went over and got on the tractor, I threw that thing in the reverse, and I was out of there. And I'm going down this dirt road doing about 30 or 40 miles an hour. And we come to, and this was an old Chev. It was like a 35 Chev or something. And the only thing they used it for was on the farm. And there was no door on the driver's side at all. And the seat was wore out and all the rest, but it run good. Anyway, there was a cement bridge that went over the canal, and it just went up and then across and then down the other side. And I went across that thing doing about 30 miles an hour and caught air. And I just about come out the door when it came down the other side. But I was having the time of my life, and dust was just flying out the back, out behind me. Well, I get down to the corner to stop, and I decide I'm going to gear down. Well, I didn't know you can't go from high to low doing 30 miles an hour. And so I'm trying to pull it into to low gear, and it won't go. And so I look down to see if what's going on, and the next thing I know, I look up and there's branches all over the windshield. And what there was a bunch of willow trees and that, and there was a couple of pretty good sized ones. And I went through these willow trees and then hit this one that was about 5 or 6 inches in diameter that went up and pushed it over, and then the truck ran right up the tree. It was on an angle up the tree, and I look, and there I am laying out, and it threw me out on the ground. I'm laying out in the middle of the road, and I look over, and there's this truck, and so I thought, well, I'm going to really get in trouble. So I ran over and jumped in the truck and started it up, and it started up and tried to back it down the tree, but the fan was pushed right up into the radiator, and it was clanging and banging like you can't believe. And I look up the road, and here comes my brother on the tractor, and he's still about over a half a mile away coming down the road. And I thought, well, if I'm hurt, maybe I won't get in trouble. So I ran back out and laid down in the road and stayed there for a while. And then I looked up, and he's still a long ways off. And I thought, oh, heck, I'm not going to do this. So I got up and ran home. And it was just kitty corner across the street from where I'd run up the tree. Unbeknownst to me, there was my little brother sitting there watching me. And he saw me come flying down the road and get thrown out in the road, jump up and run and get in the truck and try to back it down and run back out, lay down in the road, act like I'm hurt, then get up and go home. And he just laughed and his rear end off at me. But anyway, nothing really. They didn't say much to me. They wouldn't, the Coates, whose truck it was, they wouldn't let me drive even in the field after that. They said, we're afraid you're going to run it in the canal. So they didn't do much. They went and bought another one from the Army War Surplus is where they got that other one, but they didn't like the other one didn't have nearly the power the one I run up the tree, but it was parked out behind the barn for a long time.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it ran up a tree, you pull this in so it tickles your.
I've got too far out of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're all right. So that's that's awesome. I can't believe they used to drive a truck when you were in 6th grade. That's baller.
Yeah, well, it didn't. Actually, I didn't drive it very well. So,
Case in point.
there
Oh, that's awesome. Something that we talked about previously is you had bees, and I know nothing about bees.
well,
Other than, I'll take that back. When we got bees, or Larry got bees, there was a bee hat that was still around from when you guys had bees. That's all I know about bees. So,
Dad, we used to buy bread, butter, and honey is what we were raised on. If we wanted a snack, that's what it was. And like I said, Mom was baking 24 loaves of bread a week, and he'd buy honey in 5-gallon cans, and he'd buy 2 or 3 a year that we ate. And so he decided he was gonna get some beehives, and so they put them out by the apple tree, and we had 4 hives, 5. I think we ended up with like 5 hives, and they have supers, and a super is one section that's about 12 inches high, and what they do is stack them up so you could get some of them 4 or 5 supers high. And then you go through them every spring. Bees have the ability to make a queen, and if you get too many bees in a hive, then they'll make another queen, and then they'll swarm, and half of the hive will leave. Well, you don't want them to swarm because you want them to stay there and make the honey, and so we'd go through the hive every year, and you could tell the ones that they were making into a queen, and then you would just kill that bee. And so then we kept those around. My brother was allergic to them, Bob, and he got stung, and it swelled both of his eyes right shut. He was just like a sled. He couldn't hardly see out of them at all. You wanted me to tell the other story?
I really, honestly, I know nothing about any of this. This is all news to me.
I probably hadn't ought to tell this story.
Yeah, you should. Just...
So we had those hives until Dad died, and none of us kids wanted, to mess around with them. So Mom sold them. She sold all 5 hives for $40, and along with all the suits and the smoker. You had a smoker that you'd pump smoke out, and it'd calm the bees down, So, and all the extra stuff that went with it. Well, the guy just left them there, and they were out in the orchard, and they stayed there for several years. And then I decided to build a house up there at Mom's, and these hives were out in the orchard out in front of the house. And I didn't want them out there with you kids running around, so I told the guy, you got to come and get them. Well, as it turns out, my brother Paul, he wanted one of those hives. So the guy says, yeah, I'll sell you one for $40. Well, Paul got a little upset with that. He said, that's really rotten. You're going to charge me $40. So that's, and Mom sold them all and all the equipment and everything else and let you keep them there for 8 or 9 years, and now you want $40 for one of them? And he called me up all mad, and he got me worked up a little bit. So I went down one night. The bees always come back to the same spot. And when you move a beehive, you have to move it like a mile, because if you move it 1 inch during the day, the bee comes back to that exact same spot, and they won't be able to find the hole to get in. They have radar like you can't believe. But if you move them at night, and they're in the hive, and you move them a mile, then you're okay. So I drove there one night and backed in and lifted up one of these hives in the back of my pickup and drove it down the street a mile up on some of Coates' property, up down about 2700 and up there, and that was before that went through. It was just a dirt road that went up there to irrigate. Set it up on a ditch bank and was going to run up to my brother's a while later. And so we let it sit there for a few days, and then I decided it was probably a week or two. And I went down to check on it, and unbeknownst to me, it was a shortcut for the kids going to school. And they'd been throwing clods at that thing and pushing it with a stick, and those bees were so wild and mad, you can't believe it. And I go down there to pick it up, and I just wrapped my arms around it and picked it up and set it in the back of the truck. I must have got stung 15 or 20 times before. Anyway, I drove it up to my brother's and dropped it off to him. And 3 days later, he called me on the phone. He said, I sold that beehive. I said, you what? He says, I sold that beehive. He says, I found out I'm allergic to them. And the doctor told me if I got stung again, I could die. And I had to carry this stuff around with me in case I get stung. And he says, I sold it for $40. And I was so upset with him. So anyway.
Oh, dude, that's like, oh, man. If I don't know what karma is, I do now. What, was that Paul?
Yeah, that was Paul. He got me in more trouble. That's that guy. I've kind of gathered that. The more we talk, it's like you got such a wide variety in your family. I got to tell you, I look at Paul, and Paul just, he just kind of needles you, man. He gets you going. Yeah, he did. I called Merv and tried to get him, and he says, I don't want nothing to do with it. Paid the $40, but he thought it was. He thought he was justified. I felt guilty about it ever since, but I never did anything about it.
You got stung 15 times. If that's not something, then I don't know what is. I think that's God's way of saying, hey, here you go, welcome. Next time spend $40, maybe I won't, buzz the hell out of you.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's funny. Oh man, I love it. Thanks for sharing that. I've never heard that, not once, not ever in my entire life.
Well, I wasn't too proud of it.
That's all right though. You should be. It's a great story. Be proud of a great story. So one thing with your dad, I know that you guys didn't go to the doctor a lot. And I know that's been passed on to us. It's one of those things where it's like, you suck it up, you rub some dirt in, you move on. And I've known that you've had some, various, not life-threatening, nothing horrible. I mean, when you had rheumatic fever, you went to the doctor, different things. But a story that I've told multiple times is when you didn't go to the doctor, when you probably should have had a tetanus shot.
Oh, brother. Dad was a great believer in methylate. And
In what?
methylate, you don't know what that is?
No, I've never heard of that.
It's a red antiseptic type of stuff that we used to put on cuts and stuff.
Almost like iodine?
Yeah, there you go. It's the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Iodine or methylate, we used to call it.
Okay.
But anyway, I had a pair of shoes that I'd wore, and I had a hole in the bottom, but I was still wearing them. And I was out by the barn, and there was a nail in a board there, and I thought somebody's going to step on that. I better bend that over, and so I kicked at it with my shoe, and my shoe slid along the nail until it hit the hole, and then the nail went up in my foot. And so I lifted up my foot, and the board came with it, and so I stepped on the board with my other foot and then pulled my nail out and went in the house and told Dad, and he set me up on the table. And he looked at it and he said, you know, if it was bleeding, I wouldn't worry about it. But it's not, and so we're going to have to clean that out. So what he did was he took the methylate or the iodine or whatever you want to call it, and there was a glass dropper in it with I guess, and he shoved that up the hole and then squirted that iodine in there until it washed it out. And man, that smarted quite a bit. But he did that all that he did. The neighbors used to come over to the house, you know, and for odds and ends like that. I had a brother that ran a sliver up. There was a good size one up his palm of his hand, and I said, well, just leave it alone for a couple of days and let it fester up. And then he took his pocket knife and squoze it, and we get the pus and stuff around it, and popped it out. But yeah, I cut my arm pretty good, and he just pulled it together and put he called it a butterfly bandage over it, and pulled it together. He said that'll hold it. But anyway, we very rarely went to the doctor. He got sick. He had sulfa pills. If you had a sore throat, then you took sulfa pills.
What's a sulfa pill?
Beats the heck out of me, but that's Dad used to get him out to Kennecott, and you got a sore throat, you got 2 sulfa pills, and out the door you went. You went
Good to go.
Good to go to school. There was no excuse. If you had a fever, then you could do it. But I had a brother that he tried to beat the system, and he took the thermometer and put it on the stove, and it exploded the thermometer. So he went to school. But anyway.
Paul.
John.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah. I stand corrected.
Yeah, it was Johnny.
Oh, that's epic. Oh, that made me think of something with your dad. I was going to just kick out real quick. Oh, man. Slivers. Tell me about your Sunday activity during church.
Oh, geez. You know, I used to like Dad pick my slivers. He had a knife that was he could sharpen a knife like you can't believe. He'd take his knife and take up a piece of paper and just cut it right down. He had a sharp knife.
How did he sharpen it? Was it stone or okay?
With the stone is what he used. And anyway, I I'd get a little sliver or something, and I'd save it, and it was something to do at church, you know, and wait till sacrament was over, and then I'd say, Dad, I got this sliver right here. Can you get this out for me? And he'd dig them out. One day I had one pretty good one, and I said, Dad, could you get this sliver out for me? And he put his knife over the end of my finger and said, maybe we ought to just cut it off because that's a pretty good one. And I said, no, and I jerked my hand and on that knife, and it cut it pretty deep. And so took a handkerchief and wrapped it around it and said, keep it squeezed. And we never got up or left or nothing, just sit there. But it healed up. I learned that you don't jerk your finger when he's got the knife.
Right. Do you still have the scar?
It's pretty much gone. I was just a little kid. It's pretty. About the only scar I got left is the one in the palm of my hand.
Yeah. You know what's funny is I always thought that was from that story until you told that here. So, but anyway, it's we're up on our time. If you believe it, it's been 60 minutes. And it always goes super fast. I always appreciate your stories and, sharing. Appreciate my man Marcus and the opportunity we have to be here and, discuss some of these things. And there are, you say we're short on stories, my man. We barely have touched the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you got so many more things to talk about as an adult, as working at Harrington's, your kids, vacations. There are so many things that we can talk about, and really, it's just an opportunity to share those things. Not only for me, because I enjoy it and I learn things like about bees. I did not know that stuff. That's so epic, and. So we look forward to coming back and seeing everybody next week, or not next week, but in 2 weeks, and we'll take it from there.
Okay.
All right,
good.
then.